Did you know Greenland is so enormous it would stretch from New York to Los Angeles if you laid it across the United States? Yet fewer people live there than in a mid-sized suburb. Or that it sits on a bedrock that's slowly sinking under the weight of ice so thick it could bury the Eiffel Tower 17 times over? How about the fact that a river beneath Greenland's ice sheet runs longer than the Thames, that some of its rocks are the oldest on Earth, and that its coast is so jagged it has more shoreline than the entire continent of Africa? Buckle up. Greenland is the world's most extreme, most misunderstood, and most geographically mind-bending place on the planet. And we've got 50 facts to prove it. Fact 50, the world's largest island, by a ridiculous margin. Greenland spans 836,330 square miles, making it the largest island on Earth by such a commanding margin that the second largest island, New Guinea, isn't even close. It's 3 times the size of Texas. It dwarfs every European country combined. Yet most world maps using the Mercator projection warp Greenland to look even bigger than it is, making it appear roughly the same size as Africa, which is actually 14 times larger. Greenland gets the distortion treatment because it sits near the pole, where projections stretch geography into absurdity. Despite its size, the entire landmass is home to fewer than 57,000 people, making it the least densely populated territory on Earth. If Greenland were a US state, it would be by far the largest, and also the emptiest. Fact 49. It's not actually green, and Iceland isn't actually icy. The naming swap between Greenland and Iceland is one of history's most enduring geographic pranks. Norse explorer Eric the Red, banished from Iceland for manslaughter around 982 AD, sailed west and found a forbidding ice-covered island. He named it Greenland to attract settlers, reasoning that a pleasant name might lure people to an unpleasant place. It worked. Meanwhile, Iceland, which has a relatively mild climate thanks to the Gulf Stream, lush valleys, and far less permanent ice coverage than Greenland, got saddled with the frosty name. The irony has never worn off. Greenland is roughly 80% covered in ice. Iceland is around 11% covered in glaciers. The names are, essentially, backwards. Fact 48, an ice sheet so massive it bends the planet. The Greenland ice sheet contains approximately 684,000 cubic miles of ice, about 8% of all the fresh water on Earth. The weight of this ice is so immense that it has pushed the bedrock beneath Greenland into a bowl shape, depressing the center of the island nearly 1,000 feet below sea level. Remove the ice, and the land would slowly rebound over tens of thousands of years through a process called isostatic rebound. The ice reaches a maximum thickness of about 10,850 feet, over 2 miles. Stack the Eiffel Tower 17 times, and you'd roughly match the depth of the deepest ice. Scientists drill ice cores from these ancient layers to read Earth's climate history going back 800,000 years, layer by layer, like reading rings in a tree. Fact 47. The bedrock beneath it is among the oldest rock on Earth. Strip away Greenland's ice, and you'd find some of the most ancient geology on the planet. The Isua Greenstone Belt in southwestern Greenland contains rocks estimated to be 3.7 to 3.8 billion years old, among the oldest exposed crustal rocks ever found anywhere on Earth. These formations have yielded some of the earliest known chemical evidence for life itself, tiny carbon signatures in ancient sedimentary layers that suggest biological processes were underway less than 1 billion years after the planet formed. Geologists make pilgrimage to western Greenland the way physicists visit CERN, because the rocks here contain answers that can't be found anywhere else. Fact 46. A coastline longer than the entire continent of Africa. Greenland's coastline, including all its fjords, inlets, bays, and peninsulas, measures roughly 27,394 miles, longer than the entire coastline of Africa, a continent 14 times its size. The reason is Greenland's extraordinary geological complexity along its edges. Thousands of fjords slice deep into the island's margins, some stretching more than 100 miles inland. Ice carved these channels during successive glaciations, creating a fringe of watery complexity that looks like someone took a pair of scissors to the edges of the map. Navigating the complete Greenlandic coastline would take years. Pilots mapping it have returned with photographs that look less like geography and more like abstract art. Fact 45. The ice is melting, and it's raising sea levels worldwide. Greenland's ice sheet is losing mass at an accelerating rate. Studies indicate that between 1992 and 2018, Greenland shed approximately 3.8 trillion tons of ice. If the entire Greenland ice sheet melted, which would take centuries, global sea levels would rise by approximately 24 feet, enough to inundate coastal cities from Miami to Shanghai to Amsterdam. The island is ground zero for one of the most consequential ongoing geographic transformations in human history. Scientists stationed at research camps on the ice sheet monitor changes in real time, drilling, measuring, and transmitting data that feeds climate models predicting the future of coastlines around the world. Fact 44. It sits at the intersection of two oceans. Greenland occupies a unique geographic position at the junction of the Arctic Ocean and the North Atlantic Ocean. The Davis Strait separates it from Canada to the west. The Denmark Strait separates it from Iceland to the east. This positioning makes Greenland a critical regulator of global ocean circulation. Cold, dense water sinks near Greenland's coasts and drives the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, the conveyor belt of ocean currents that keeps northwestern Europe dramatically warmer than it would otherwise be. Scientists monitoring this system from research vessels near Greenland are, in effect, taking the pulse of a planetary climate system that has kept European temperatures habitable for millennia. Fact 43. A hidden mountain range lies buried under the ice. Beneath the Greenland ice sheet lies a mountain range called the Gakkel Greenland Ridge. But even more dramatically, radar surveys have revealed the Greenland ice sheet conceals an entire mountain landscape with peaks and valleys comparable in scale to the Alps. The Watkins Range in eastern Greenland contains Greenland's highest point, Gunnbjorn Fjeld, which rises 12,119 feet above sea level and is actually the highest peak in the Arctic. Most of the interior mountain terrain is invisible, buried under thousands of feet of ice, revealed only through airborne radar surveys. The hidden topography beneath Greenland's ice has been mapped in detail only in recent decades, and each new survey reveals new features. Fact 42. The world's largest national park sits entirely within it. Northeast Greenland National Park, established in 1974, is the largest national park on Earth, covering 375,000 square miles, an area larger than France and Germany combined. It contains no permanent human settlements. It is patrolled by a military unit called Serious Dog Sled Patrol, which maintains Danish sovereignty over this remote territory by traversing it by dog sled, a journey that covers thousands of miles each year in temperatures that regularly plunge below -40 degrees. The park is home to polar bears, musk oxen, Arctic foxes, and walruses. Access requires a permit. Most people who have visited it could fit in a single lecture hall. Fact 41. There's a river running beneath the ice. Scientists have identified what appears to be a subglacial river system beneath the Greenland ice sheet that extends for at least 460 miles, longer than the Thames. The river, which flows in complete darkness under thousands of feet of ice, drains meltwater from the interior of the island toward the ocean. Subglacial rivers like this are detected using airborne radar that penetrates the ice and maps the terrain below. They matter enormously. These drainage channels affect how quickly the ice sheet moves and melts. The discovery of extensive subglacial hydrology beneath Greenland fundamentally changed how scientists model ice sheet dynamics and revised predictions about future sea level rise. Fact 40. Midnight sun and polar night in spectacular extremes. Greenland's northern regions experience the midnight sun, continuous daylight, for up to 3 months in summer, and polar night, continuous darkness, for roughly the same period in winter. At Qaanaaq, one of the world's northernmost towns, the sun doesn't set from late April through late August. Then, in November, it doesn't rise at all until January. The psychological and physiological effects of these extremes are well documented among residents. The sky during polar night compensates somewhat with spectacular displays of the aurora borealis, the northern lights. Curtains of green, purple, and white light ripple across the dark sky with a frequency and intensity that makes Greenland one of the premier aurora viewing locations on Earth. Fact 39. It was once covered in actual green forests. Around 2.5 million years ago, before the ice sheets formed, Greenland lived up to its name. Fossil evidence, including ancient plant material preserved in ice cores and exposed in outcrops, shows that Greenland was once covered with boreal forests of spruce, fir, and pine. Temperatures were significantly warmer than today. The island transitioned to glaciation as Earth entered a prolonged period of cooling, and the forests were buried, preserved in permafrost, and eventually overrun by ice. Scientists drilling into the deepest layers of the Greenland ice sheet have found organic sediment and preserved plant material at the base, ghost evidence of a forested Greenland that existed before the ice arrived and could return if warming continues unchecked. Fact 38. Its fjords are among the deepest in the world. Scoresby Sound in eastern Greenland is the world's largest fjord system, stretching roughly 220 miles inland and containing depths exceeding 4,900 feet in places, deep enough to submerge the entire Empire State Building 3 times over. The fjord was carved by glaciers advancing and retreating over millions of years, grinding through rock with relentless force and creating the dramatic cliff-sided channels that define Greenland's coastal landscape. Icebergs calved from the Greenland ice sheet drift through these fjords in quantities that beggar description, some individual bergs the size of small towns. Sailing into Scoresby Sound has been described as navigating through a cathedral made of ice and stone. Fact 37. The world's most productive iceberg factory. Jakobshavn Glacier on Greenland's western coast is one of the fastest-moving glaciers on Earth, advancing and calving icebergs into Disco Bay at a rate that makes it the single largest contributor to iceberg production in the Northern Hemisphere. The iceberg that sank the Titanic in 1912 almost certainly originated from Jakobshavn Glacier, or one of its neighbors along the Greenlandic coast. These bergs drift south through the Labrador Sea, posing navigational hazards that have been monitored since the International Ice Patrol was established in the aftermath of the Titanic disaster. The glacier itself has retreated dramatically in recent decades. Fact 36. The aurora borealis is practically a nightly show. Greenland sits directly under the auroral oval, the ring-shaped zone around the magnetic pole where solar particles collide with Earth's atmosphere and produce the northern lights. This positioning means that in the dark months, auroras are not rare spectacles but nearly nightly occurrences, visible for hours at a time with an intensity rarely matched elsewhere. The lights ripple from horizon to horizon in curtains of green and violet. In strong solar events, red and blue appear, and the entire sky seems to breathe. The Inuit have centuries of oral tradition about the northern lights, some describing them as spirits playing ball, others as torches carried by the dead. Whatever the interpretation, the physics are extraordinary.
Facts 35. It has one of the most extreme tidal ranges on Earth. Certain areas of Greenland's coast experience tidal fluctuations exceeding 16 feet between low and high tide. At the head of some fjords, the combination of funnel-shaped geography and the enormous volume of water moving through creates tidal bores and standing waves that rearrange the coastal landscape twice daily. These tides affect iceberg movement, shoreline ecology, and navigation in ways that make detailed tidal charts essential for anyone operating in Greenlandic waters. The interaction between tide, glacier melt, and ocean currents creates a constantly shifting coastal environment where the same bay can look completely different from one day to the next. Facts 34. A meteor impact crater lurks beneath the ice. In 2018, scientists announced the discovery of a massive impact crater buried beneath the Hiawatha Glacier in northwestern Greenland. The crater measures roughly 19 miles across, making it one of the largest known impact craters on Earth. The meteorite that created it struck sometime in the last 3 million years, geologically recent, and the impact would have been catastrophic, vaporizing rock, triggering massive fires, and potentially destabilizing climate. Detecting it required decades of airborne radar surveys that gradually revealed the circular depression beneath more than half a mile of ice. It is the first large impact crater discovered under an ice sheet anywhere on Earth, and scientists suspect there may be others still waiting to be found. Facts 33. Vikings built farms here and then abandoned them. Norse settlers established 2 colonies on Greenland's southwestern coast starting around 985 AD, the Eastern Settlement and the Western Settlement. At their peak,
These colonies contained hundreds of farms and thousands of settlers who raised livestock, hunted, exported walrus ivory, and maintained contact with Europe for nearly 500 years. Then they vanished. By around 1400, the western settlement had collapsed. The eastern settlement followed by roughly 1450. The reasons remain debated: climate cooling during the Little Ice Age, conflict with Inuit people expanding southward, the collapse of the walrus ivory trade, soil degradation, and possibly stubborn refusal to adapt. The ruins of Norse farmhouses still poke from Greenland soil, testaments to a civilization that almost made the Arctic work. Fact 32. The Inuit arrived thousands of years before the Vikings. Greenland's indigenous Inuit people, whose ancestors arrived via the Arctic archipelago from what is now Canada, have inhabited Greenland for approximately 4,500 years. Multiple waves of migration brought different cultural groups, the Sakak, Dorset, and eventually Thule cultures, from whom modern Greenlandic Inuit descend. These people developed technologies specifically optimized for Arctic survival: the kayak for hunting sea mammals, the umiak for group transport, the kajak design so hydrodynamically efficient that it remains the basis for modern kayak design worldwide. The Thule people spread across Greenland and eventually encountered Norse settlers, and the two civilizations coexisted, traded, and occasionally clashed for centuries. Fact 31. Greenland's capital is built on ancient volcanic rock. Nuuk, Greenland's capital and largest city, sits on a peninsula of ancient metamorphic and volcanic rock jutting into a fjord system on the southwestern coast. With a population of around 19,000, Nuuk is simultaneously the world's smallest national capital by population and the only city in Greenland large enough to have traffic lights. The city sits at the mouth of the Nuuk-Kangerlua Fjord, one of the most spectacular urban settings on Earth, with icebergs visible from downtown streets and mountains rising directly behind the harbor. The old colonial quarter, established by Danish missionary Hans Egede in 1728, sits adjacent to modern government buildings and apartment blocks in a juxtaposition of centuries. Fact 30. It has its own time zones. Multiple ones. Despite its sparse population, Greenland operates in 4 different time zones, reflecting the island's enormous east-west extent and the different colonial and administrative histories of its settlements. Most of the populated west coast uses Western Greenland time, 3 hours behind UTC. The far northeastern communities use Eastern Greenland time. The Thule Air Base area uses Atlantic Standard Time in alignment with the U.S. military installation there. And the tiny settlement of Itakortermit on the isolated east coast operates on Iceland time. Coordinating schedules across Greenland requires the same complexity you'd expect from a continent, applied to a population that would fit comfortably in a small city. Fact 29. The Labrador Current begins its journey here. The cold, southward-flowing Labrador Current, which chills the coastlines of Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and New England, produces frequent fog over the Grand Banks and influences weather patterns across the entire North American eastern seaboard, originates in the waters around Greenland. Cold water off Greenland's coasts mixes, sinks, and flows southwest, carrying Arctic temperatures into the North Atlantic. The same current that made the Titanic's iceberg encounter fatal is responsible for the cold summers of coastal Maine, the rich fishing grounds of the Grand Banks, and the persistent fog banks that mariners have cursed for centuries. Greenland's climate, in other words, shapes weather experienced by tens of millions of people who have never seen it. Fact 28. A U.S. nuclear weapons base is still buried in the ice. During the Cold War, the United States military operated a secret facility called Camp Century in northern Greenland, burrowed into the ice sheet under the cover of being a research station. In reality, it was part of Project Iceworm, a plan to house hundreds of nuclear missiles in tunnels beneath the ice. The facility was abandoned in 1967 when engineers realized the moving ice sheet would eventually crush the tunnels. The waste left behind, including radioactive coolant and fuel, was expected to remain safely buried under accumulating snow forever. But as Greenland's ice melts, scientists now calculate that these frozen contaminants could be exposed by the late 21st century. Fact 27. It experiences earthquakes triggered by its own melting. As the Greenland ice sheet loses mass, the pressure on the bedrock beneath it decreases, causing the land to rebound upward in a process called glacial isostatic adjustment. This rebound happens slowly overall, but in areas of rapid melt, it can be surprisingly quick and is accompanied by seismic activity. Additionally, glacial earthquakes, massive ice quakes triggered when large glaciers suddenly lurch forward, have been measured registering up to magnitude 5.1. These are not tectonic earthquakes in the traditional sense, but rather the geological expression of ice moving. Greenland, in other words, shakes itself as it melts. Scientists monitoring these events use seismographs across the ice sheet to track glacier dynamics in real time. Fact 26. Its wildflowers bloom in explosive defiance of the cold. During the brief Arctic summer, Greenland's ice-free coastal margins transform into fields of wildflowers so vivid and dense that early explorers described them as resembling alpine meadows in the Alps. Arctic cotton grass, purple saxifrage, yellow poppies, and white mountain avens bloom across tundra that was frozen solid weeks before. The growing season lasts roughly 8 to 10 weeks, and plants compress an entire year's growth into this frantic window. The purple saxifrage is often the first to bloom, sometimes pushing through snow, and is Greenland's national flower. For a few weeks each summer, the idea that Greenland's name was entirely misleading becomes genuinely, briefly, debatable.
Fact 25. The world's longest active dog sledding culture lives here. Greenlandic Inuit have used sled dogs for transportation for over 1,000 years, and Greenland maintains one of the world's last genuine working dog sled cultures. In the north and east, where roads don't exist and motorized transport is impractical on sea ice, dog sleds remain a primary mode of winter travel. Greenlandic sled dogs, a distinct and ancient breed, are not pets. They are working animals maintained in specific conditions outside settlements. There are estimated to be more sled dogs in some Greenlandic communities than human residents. The Serious Dog Sled Patrol, the military unit that patrols northeast Greenland, uses dog sled teams to traverse territories no snowmobile could safely reach. Fact 24. It sits on a continental plate that's still moving. Greenland rides on the North American tectonic plate and is slowly moving westward at roughly an inch per year, the same speed at which human fingernails grow. Over millions of years, this movement has carried Greenland from positions much closer to the equator, which is why ancient tropical fossils have been found in Greenlandic rocks. The island's position over the geological hotspot that created Iceland has also influenced its volcanic history. The intersection of plate tectonics and glaciation over geological timescales has produced the extraordinary landscape Greenland presents today, a land shaped by forces operating simultaneously at the scale of continents and the scale of individual ice crystals. Fact 23. The Greenland shark lives here, and it's possibly 400 years old. The Greenland shark, found in the cold, deep waters surrounding the island, is the longest-lived vertebrate on Earth. Scientists analyzing the eye lenses of captured sharks have estimated maximum lifespans of possibly 400 years or more, meaning some sharks alive today were born before the American Revolution. These slow-moving, deep-dwelling sharks grow at roughly 1 centimeter per year and reach sexual maturity only after about 150 years. They have been found at depths exceeding 7,200 feet. Nearly all Greenland sharks are blind in adulthood due to a parasitic copepod that attaches to their corneas. Despite this, they are efficient predators, and analysis of their stomach contents has revealed seals, fish, and occasionally horse remains. Fact 22. It has more icebergs than anywhere else on Earth. Greenland produces an estimated 10,000 to 15,000 icebergs per year, more than any other source on Earth. The largest of these bergs can be the size of a small town, rising 300 feet above the waterline. And since roughly 90% of an iceberg sits below the surface, these giants extend 2,700 feet or more into the ocean. They drift south through the Labrador Sea, gradually melting as they enter warmer waters. Some survive long enough to reach the shipping lanes of the North Atlantic, where they remain hazards. The International Ice Patrol, established after the Titanic's sinking in 1912, monitors these drifting giants and issues daily reports to mariners. Fact 21. There are no roads between its towns. Greenland has no road connecting any of its towns to any other. Each settlement is effectively an island, accessible only by boat, helicopter, or small aircraft. The island's terrain,
Mountains, ice sheets, and fjords makes road construction essentially impossible across most of its area. Nuuk's road network is entirely contained within the city limits. Air Greenland operates an extensive network of helicopter and small plane routes connecting coastal communities, making helicopter travel more routine for ordinary residents than in almost any other country on Earth. This geographic isolation shapes everything about Greenlandic culture, economics, and governance, creating a society accustomed to solving problems without external help.
Fact 20. The most remote town in the Northern Hemisphere is here. Ittoqqortoormiit on Greenland's isolated eastern coast is one of the most remote, permanently inhabited settlements in the Northern Hemisphere. It sits 500 miles from the nearest town by sea. The only access is by helicopter or occasional ship during the brief, ice-free season. About 350 people live there, supported primarily by hunting and fishing. The nearest grocery store, in the broad sense, requires a flight or multi-day sea voyage. Residents hunt polar bear, narwhal, muskox, and ringed seal, not as a cultural performance, but as a genuine necessity. The settlement sits at the edge of Scoresby Sound, the world's largest fjord, surrounded by some of the most spectacular and inaccessible scenery on the planet. Fact 19. A Cold War early warning system spans its interior. During the Cold War, Greenland's strategic position between North America and the Soviet Union made it critical military real estate. The Distant Early Warning (DEW) line and later North Warning System placed radar stations across Greenland's northern coast to detect incoming Soviet bombers and missiles. Thule Air Base in northwestern Greenland, established in 1951, became one of the most important U.S. military installations on Earth, a critical node for nuclear deterrence, space surveillance, and missile defense. It remains active today, now known as Patuffik Space Base. The base sits inside the territory of the Inuguit people, who were relocated without consent in 1953 to make room for its construction, a displacement that remains a source of legal and political conflict. Fact 18. Greenland has narwhals, the actual unicorn of the sea. The waters surrounding Greenland are home to some of the world's largest populations of narwhal, the toothed whale whose males sport a spiraling tusk that can extend up to 10 feet. Narwhals congregate in Greenlandic fjords and bays in groups of hundreds, creating one of the most surreal wildlife spectacles on Earth. The tusk is actually a modified tooth, and its function has been debated by scientists for decades. It is laced with sensory nerve endings and may help males detect changes in water temperature, salinity, or pressure. Medieval European traders sold narwhal tusks as unicorn horns, and they were worth their weight in gold. Greenlandic hunters have traditionally hunted narwhals for their muktuk, the skin and blubber eaten as a delicacy. Fact 17. Its highest peak is the tallest mountain in the Arctic. Gunnbjornfjeld, in the Watkins Range of eastern Greenland, stands 12,119 feet above sea level and is the highest point in Greenland, in the Arctic, and in the entire North Atlantic region. It is technically an eroded volcanic intrusion, a nunatak, meaning a mountain peak that protrudes above the surrounding ice sheet. Reaching it requires crossing difficult glaciated terrain and is a serious mountaineering objective. The first confirmed ascent occurred only in 1935. The surrounding Watkins Range contains a cluster of peaks that form one of the most remote and difficult high mountain environments on Earth, visited by only a handful of expeditions per year. Fact 16. It has more polar bears than people in some regions. The northeastern coasts and sea ice zones of Greenland host substantial polar bear populations, apex predators that wander freely across territories where human settlements are hundreds of miles apart. In parts of northeastern Greenland, polar bears genuinely outnumber permanent human residents. The bears are protected but can be legally hunted by Inuit communities under traditional subsistence rules. Climate change is affecting their habitat. As sea ice retreats earlier each spring, bears have less time to hunt seals from the ice and must fast for longer periods on land. Researchers tracking Greenlandic polar bear populations have documented declining body weights and reproductive rates in recent decades, direct consequences of a shrinking frozen habitat. Fact 15. The ice contains an 800,000-year climate record. Scientists drilling ice cores from the Greenland ice sheet have extracted samples from depths representing 800,000 years of accumulated snowfall. Each layer traps ancient air bubbles, dust particles, volcanic ash, and chemical signatures that record the atmospheric composition and temperature of the year the snow fell. Reading these layers is like reading an extraordinarily detailed diary of Earth's climate: ice ages and warm periods, ancient volcanic eruptions, the Industrial Revolution's spike in carbon dioxide, and every major climatic event in between. The Neem Ice Core project extracted ice from a depth of 2,540 meters, reaching layers deposited during the last interglacial period when Greenland's temperatures were several degrees warmer than today. The implications for understanding future warming are profound. Fact 14. It's technically an autonomous territory of Denmark, but barely. Greenland is officially a constituent territory of the Kingdom of Denmark, but it has operated under home rule since 1979 and gained expanded self-government in 2009. It controls its own domestic affairs, policing, courts, and natural resources. Denmark retains responsibility for foreign affairs and defense, and Greenlandic citizens are EU citizens, though Greenland itself voted to leave the European Community in 1985, the only territory to have ever done so. Independence from Denmark is an ongoing political aspiration for many Greenlandic politicians, with the island's vast natural resource wealth, oil, rare earth minerals, fish, making the economic case for independence increasingly feasible. Fact 13. Rare earth minerals beneath the ice could reshape global supply chains. As Greenland's ice melts, it is revealing vast mineral deposits that were previously inaccessible. The Kvanefjeld deposit in southern Greenland contains one of the world's largest known concentrations of rare earth elements, materials essential for the magnets in electric motors, wind turbines, and consumer electronics. China currently dominates global rare earth production, and Greenland's deposits represent one of the few substantial alternatives. The prospect has attracted enormous international interest, including reported overtures from the United States government, and sparked fierce domestic political debate in Greenland between those who see mineral wealth as the path to independence and those who fear environmental damage to pristine ecosystems. Fact 12. It has active hot springs in its southern reaches. Unartok Island in southern Greenland is home to natural hot springs that maintain temperatures warm enough for bathing year-round, even as snow and ice cover the surrounding landscape. Temperatures in the pools reach around 100 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit, fed by geothermal heat from ancient volcanic structures in the region. The sight of steaming pools surrounded by icebergs and glaciers is jarring in the best possible way. The springs have been used by Inuit communities for centuries and are now a destination for kayakers and expedition travelers willing to make the remote journey to reach them. They are a small reminder that beneath Greenland's frozen exterior, the Earth is still warm. Fact 11. The midnight sun turns the ice sheet pink and gold. During the Arctic summer, the sun circles the horizon without setting, casting perpetual golden and rose-tinted light across the Greenland ice sheet for weeks at a time. The effect is nothing short of hallucinatory. The flat white surface turns amber, the distant ice mountains glow orange, and shadows stretch for miles across an illuminated frozen ocean. Photographers who have witnessed this describe it as the closest thing on Earth to standing on another planet. The ice reflects roughly 80% of incoming solar radiation in a property called high albedo, which normally helps cool the climate. As ice melts and darker ocean or soil is exposed, this reflectivity decreases, creating a feedback loop that accelerates warming. Fact 10. A massive underwater ridge connects it to Iceland. The Greenland-Iceland Ridge, a submarine mountain range rising from the floor of the North Atlantic, forms a shallow underwater bridge between Greenland and Iceland. At its shallowest, the ridge rises to within 400 feet of the surface. This topographic barrier plays a crucial role in North Atlantic Ocean circulation, effectively acting as a dam that separates the cold, deep waters of the Arctic from the warmer North Atlantic basin. Cold, dense water spills over this ridge in what oceanographers call overflow, the primary driver of deep water circulation in the Atlantic. The ridge is also volcanically active, part of the same hotspot system that created Iceland. Fact 9. Walruses haul out here by the thousands. Greenland hosts some of the largest walrus haul-out sites in the world, where thousands of these massive animals, adults weigh up to 1.5 tons, drag themselves onto ice floes and rocky shores to rest, socialize, and breed. The Atlantic walrus population that frequents Greenlandic waters was hunted nearly to extinction for its ivory tusks and oil during the 18th and 19th centuries, but has partially recovered under modern protections. Walruses are a keystone species in Arctic ecosystems, stirring the seafloor while foraging for clams and creating feeding opportunities for other species. Their distribution in Greenland is shifting northward as sea ice retreats, concentrating populations in areas where haul-out space is limited. Fact 8. It has an entire island that didn't exist until recently. In 1978, a small rocky island was discovered in northwestern Greenland that has since been identified as the world's northernmost confirmed landmass. Named Udak Island, it sits just over 400 miles from the North Pole and was submerged for much of its existence, only barely protruding above sea level. Whether it is a permanent island or a temporary gravel bank that appears and disappears depending on wave conditions and sediment accumulation remains debated. In 2021, a Danish-Swiss expedition announced they had found an even more northerly island nearby. The geography of extreme northern Greenland is, in the most literal sense, still being discovered. Fact 7. The ice is darkening, and that's a catastrophic feedback loop. Black carbon from distant wildfires and industrial emissions, along with biological algae and other dark particles, is depositing on Greenland's ice surface, reducing its reflectivity. Dark ice absorbs more solar radiation than clean white ice, causing it to melt faster, which exposes more dark material, which absorbs more radiation in a self-reinforcing cycle. Satellites monitoring the albedo, the reflectivity, of the Greenland ice sheet have recorded significant darkening over portions of the surface in recent decades. The phenomenon is called the dark zone, and it stretches across a broad swath of western Greenland's ablation zone. Scientists studying it are watching, in real time, one of the most consequential feedback loops in contemporary climate science. Fact 6. Its meltwater is changing the ocean's salinity. The massive volumes of freshwater flowing off the Greenland ice sheet, from surface melting, calving icebergs, and subglacial drainage, are measurably reducing the salinity of the North Atlantic Ocean. This matters enormously because the thermohaline circulation, the system of ocean currents that distributes heat around the planet, depends on precise differences in water density, which is determined by temperature and salt content. Freshwater is less dense than salt water. Inject enough of it, and you can disrupt the sinking of cold water near Greenland that drives the circulation. Data collected by oceanographers working in Greenlandic waters suggests this disruption is already underway, with measurable consequences for current strength that are propagating through the entire Atlantic circulation system.
Fact 5. Greenland has experienced a surface melt event every summer. In July 2012, approximately 97% of the surface of the Greenland ice sheet showed signs of melting simultaneously. A statistically extraordinary event that climate scientists initially thought was an instrument error. It wasn't. The 2012 event was followed by similarly dramatic summer melt seasons in subsequent years, with 2019 seeing 11 billion tons of ice melt in a single day. Greenland's surface melt seasons are now starting earlier, ending later, and reaching higher elevations than at any point in the ice core record. Research stations on the summit of the ice sheet, at 10,500 feet elevation, a location that had never recorded melting in the 30-year observational record, registered melt conditions for the first time in 2012. It has happened multiple times since. Fact 4. Ancient DNA from its permafrost is rewriting evolutionary history. Permafrost samples from Greenland have yielded ancient DNA that is transforming scientists' understanding of life in the far north. Plant, insect, and microbial DNA extracted from frozen soil samples over 500,000 years old has revealed unexpected biodiversity in ancient Arctic ecosystems. Genes from ancient butterflies, beetles, and plants have been recovered and sequenced, demonstrating that the Arctic was once far more biodiverse than modern conditions suggest, and that many cold-adapted species lineages are far older than previously thought. The permafrost acts as a biological time capsule, preserving organic material in conditions that are only now being disturbed by warming temperatures.
which means that as the permafrost thaws, this archive is being destroyed even as it is being read. Fact 3. It may have inspired the legend of Ultima Thule. Ancient Greek explorer Pytheas, sailing north from Massalia around 325 BC, described reaching a land called Thule at the edge of the known world, a place where sea, air, and earth were indistinguishable, where the sun barely set, and where the ocean was frozen. Scholars have debated whether Thule was Iceland, Norway, or Greenland, but the description of a frozen, fog-bound, midnight sun world at the absolute margin of existence fits Greenland with uncanny accuracy. The name Ultima Thule, the farthest Thule, became a byword for the most remote conceivable place, and the Greenlandic town of Qaanaaq was officially called Thule for much of the 20th century. Whether Pytheas reached Greenland shores, he described something that could only have been the world's most extreme geography. Fact 2. The entire planet's future coastlines depend on what happens here. More than any other single place on Earth, Greenland holds the key to humanity's coastal future. Its ice sheet contains enough water to raise global sea levels by 24 feet. Every town built within a few feet of current sea level, from Miami to Mumbai, from Shanghai to Amsterdam, has a future that is partly determined by the rate at which Greenland's ice melts. Satellite systems, research stations, ice drilling projects, and oceanographic surveys operating across Greenland are the instruments by which humanity is trying to read its own future in ice. The island sits at the center of the most consequential ongoing scientific investigation in history, a race to understand a system that is changing faster than anyone predicted, with implications for billions of people who will never see a single glacier. Fact 1. Everything really is more extreme in Greenland. From the oldest rocks on Earth to the world's largest island, from icebergs the size of towns to sharks that were alive when Shakespeare was writing, from a hidden meteor crater to a subterranean river flowing in permanent darkness, Greenland operates at the outer limit of what geography allows. It is a place built on superlatives and extremes, the biggest, the deepest, the oldest, the coldest, the most remote. It holds the climate history of the planet in layers of ice and the future of the world's coastlines in its glaciers. It is simultaneously one of the last genuinely wild places on Earth and one of the most consequential. And while it may not have rattlesnake festivals or 85-mile-per-hour speed limits, it does have 400-year-old sharks, unicorn-tusked whales, and rocks that remember when the first life was learning to breathe. That's not just geography. That's the whole story of the planet.